Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Can we take our seats, please? We'd like to get the great debate started. Please come to this side. Come into the middle. Can you please move a little bit to the middle? Come to the. Can you move a little bit to the middle? Can you please move a little bit to the middle? It's very difficult to take part in the debate if you're so far away. Come. Okay, these gentlemen here, can you move a little bit? Okay, let's make a start. Hello? Let's make a start. Welcome to the great debate, which is mounted by the Europaeum, which is a network of leading European universities, including the Cattolica University. I'm not Martin, my name is Paul Flather. I will introduce Dr. Martin Valesky very shortly. He's unable to be with us at short notice, but will give us a welcome as the host for this session. But first, I want to give the floor to Mr. Diego Feo, who is chairman of the board of directors of the IDL Instituto Amaro da Costa, based in Lisbon. He has worn and is wearing many, many hats, as you know, as a lecturer, as a tax arbiter, as an MEP, as a former MP, as an author, and as an economist, I would say. So he has an important announcement just before we start. Mr. Feo.
Thank you, Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be here today for another edition of the prestigious Estoril Political Forum. Further to last year's, I reiterate that it is much nicer to be here in person and facing all of you, where times we lived. I'm confident they have now been overcome with the support of the science of all of those that have worked hardly on the various fronts against coronavirus. Again, as in previous years, I would like to point out the enormous professionalism shown once more in supporting the speakers and in setting such a program of excellence of great relevance both at academic and scientific level. A special word is to be given to the IEP in the person of Professor João Carlos Espada for the work that has been done through the years by this institution in the field of the political science in Portugal. I'm here to present the Adelina Mar da Costa Award that the IDL, Democratic and Freedom Institute, sponsor in a long-standing relationship with the IEP. The study of political science is of relevance in this time of a new hope. We are in the moment of a post-pandemic economy recovery, and political stability will have a critical role. However, and as we know in historic shows, such political stability and balance is permitting being challenged. It is necessary to have a special scientific analysis of what concerns geopolitics in a globalized world, especially in the European Union, that is going through unprecedented times marked by the pandemic and nationalist movements. We have recently seen the example of the decision of the Constitutional Polish Court challenging the supremacy of EU law. In my opinion, we need strong political response at both sides, national and European level. This being said, and more important, I propose an award of 1,000 euros for the best essay. The papers will be analyzed by a scientific committee appointed by the direction of the Institute. As Alina Mar da Costa said, youth is not installed. I believe in that, and I believe in you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Feo. Next, I would like to call on Dr. Valesky, who is the new director of the Europaeum, who will be joining us from Oxford down the line. He has a long and distinguished record working on democracy support in 50 countries, most recently with the OSCE, that's the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, where he led the democratization department. And he's held various academics. Martin.
Very good afternoon. Hello, Paul, and warm greetings from surprisingly warm and sunny Oxford. I'm supposed to be with you indeed in Estoril, enjoying this wonderful conference and dancing with the Lisbon swingers, but unfortunately, which is not necessarily anyone's fault, we're still struggling with COVID. My son got infected, and I decided not to travel to help keep conference attendees safe and prevent the further spread of the virus. And I also decided to experiment with the hybrid regime with Zoom, and I can see that it works really well. Ladies and gentlemen, since early 1990s, scholars, policy experts, opinion leaders, journalists, and students meet annually at the Estoril Political Forum for an open debate on political science and international relations. We are celebrating 29th anniversary of this prestigious forum. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that this meeting is acknowledged as a program of excellence, gathering some of the most distinguished experts in the field and giving our students the opportunity to learn from and interact with most senior scholars and opinion makers. It is a great honor and privilege to host the Europaeum Special Debate, and please allow me to thank in particular two individuals. Let me start with our dear friend, Professor João Espada. Professor Espada has been a true inspiration for all of us, and my first platitude and utmost gratitude goes for his dedication, enthusiasm, professionalism in organizing all these meetings, and many thanks to him and his team for organizing particularly this meeting in these difficult circumstances. My second thanks go to Dr. Paul Flatter, former Secretary General of the Europaeum. Dr. Flatter, who has been running this debate since 2008, everyone knows is behind the success, fun, and making them so interesting. And Paul, I checked the first debate you organized in 2008 was, should human rights play a major role in international affairs? And we are still debating this topic at all our Europaeum events. Many, many thanks, Paul, for all your years of hard work. This debate will be in the form of a public Oxford Union-style event with graduate students who will be involved in two different teams, one team speaking for, one against a given proposition, with distinguished commentators at hand, and final open vote on the proposition take. And on this occasion, allow me to welcome our distinguished debaters from the Europaeum network. And when I say Europaeum network, I also refer to my dear colleague students from the Jagiellonian University and the Institute for Political Studies of the Catholic University of Portugal. All of them are part of Europaeum family. It was mentioned before, one of the member states, indeed, those of us who were watching recent debates in the European Parliament, note that voicing ideas and defending principles is now so difficult that real public debate has become almost impossible. But we are keeping this debate within Europaeum family. to illustrate that civilized debate is still possible in Europe. The motion to be debated will be, are big tech and fake news the real threats to democracies today? And there is no better chair to chair this debate than Dr. Platter. And allow me at the end to welcome also our two distinguished discussants, Ines Domingos and Dr. Nuno Sampraul. And as I said earlier, I wish I could join you in person, but I'm going to watch this debate with a great interest through Zoom. Thank you, Paul. Floor goes back to you.
Thank you very much, Martin. So I'm going to welcome you then to this great debate. I'll just make a few opening remarks and then we'll move swiftly into the debate. The theme of the debate has already appeared in many sessions. We've talked about the problems of surveillance technology. We've talked about the growth of AI in our lives. We've talked about cyber warfare and the problem of getting our messages across to people. Perhaps we haven't talked enough about how social media played key roles in getting protests together, for example, in the Arab Spring, 10 years ago, would you believe, the Hong Kong protests, even the recent Belarus protests. So now is our chance to actually focus on this issue of technology, of the benefits and the disadvantages. The motion is up. I think you can see it on the screens there. And we try also to bring in this underlying theme of the conference about alliances. I've asked both the teams to think about that. You've heard that we'll have a proposing team, an opposing team. We have some experts. Let me just very briefly remind you of the rules of the debate. Once we start the debate, we have to stay within the rules, okay? That is, in a sense, the game. We will have the aim is to persuade people of the position that we support. And we also want to have, as Martin was saying, we want to have a lot of fun and enjoy this. And also we want to engage as many people from the audience as we possibly can fit into the time. Now, there are three ways that you can challenge a speaker or raise a point. The first way is called a point of order, and that is a challenge of the whole debate, and that is a challenge that comes to me as the chair. So you might want, I mean, if for example, the air conditioning failed, or if, for example, you thought I was being very unfair to one side, or, you know, maybe my hat has fallen off, then you can challenge the chair. The second way that you can challenge is to raise a point of information. And if you raise a point of information, then the speaker must pause and listen to your point, and they can choose, she can choose maybe to reply or not, okay? If you raise any of these points, you should stand up and say point of order, which means everything has to stop, point of information, which is addressed to the speaker. And the normal third way is just to have an intervention when you just stand up, and we will see if we can recognize you, and then you interrupt the speaker. So you have three different ways to do that. And we encourage that, but not over much. We'll see how we go. But I'm looking around for people to make this a lively and challenged debate. So just to recap on the way the debate will go, we will invite the proposer of the motion to speak, and then the opposer of the motion to speak. And then from each side there will be a seconder for the motion. And then we will have a little bit of open debate where we'll invite people to contribute for and against from the floor. Each speaker will have up to 4 minutes, each person from the floor up to 2 minutes. I have to be tough because time is tight, so I have my bell. Okay? So I will probably give you a little warning like that. You know, you have 15 seconds or 20 seconds, and then I will say time's up, and then I will go like this. Hopefully you will stop. After the bit of open debate, we have our two experts, and I will introduce them at the appropriate time. We'll have a little bit more open debate, then we'll have the third speaker, and then we'll have the closing speaker and the vote. What I would like to do, once I put my hat on, we've started, What I would like to do now is for you to imagine, if you were voting for this motion now, which way you would vote, okay? I'd like you to remember that, because we'll compare that to your vote at the end, okay? So don't tell anybody, but just imagine which way you would vote. And at the end, when you vote, you will vote on what you heard in the debate. That's very important, okay? Now you can vote on what your personal feeling is as you come into the hall. But at the end, I want you to vote on who persuaded you. So you're listening hard for each speaker, who was really persuasive, who was funny, who was interesting, and that should swing your vote, okay? Very good. I'm going to move to the debate. I hope it's all very clear. And that, as soon as I put my hat on, we're in business, and we will call the first proposer, okay? So here we go. Welcome. Welcome to this great debate. Who do we have first to propose the motion? I think we have Codalonga Solares, who is studying the European Politics and Society MA, and which means that she's been in Leiden and Prague and Krakow. You have the floor.
Is this on?
Should be on.
All right.
Yes.
Honorable Chairman, distinguished guests, as Abraham Lincoln once said, democracy is the government of the people, for the people, by the people. It has played a vital role in the history of civilization, helping transforming the world from autocratic power structures of monarchy, empires, and conquest into popular rule, self-determination, and peaceful coexistence. The democratic idea has prevailed through a long and turbulent history, and democratic government has overcome continuing challenges. Democracy is the only way to achieve security, stability, and prosperity for the entire world, and it is the primary safeguard of basic human rights. Democratic government, which is elected by and accountable to its citizens, protects individual rights so that we can undertake our civic obligations and responsibilities, thereby strengthening the society as a whole. And democracy depends upon literate, knowledgeable citizenry whose access to information enables them to participate as fully as possible in the public life of society and to criticize unwise or oppressive governments. It depends upon the widest possible access to uncensored ideas, data, and opinions. This is why fake news and big tech pose an urgent threat to the very core of democratic systems. Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Amazon have become bottlenecks through which people feel forced to pass through to conduct the business of life. They were already very powerful before the COVID-19 pandemic, but they have become even more so after that, as very much of our everyday life has moved online. The pandemic has exposed our utter reliance on them. Politics and business are both built upon information, and thus information and communication technologies are an essential intermediary. Our knowledge of the world, the tools we use to connect, and how we mobilize politically are mediated by the internet. That leaves the gatekeepers of the internet with unprecedented and unchecked power because the tools they provide are irreplaceable. Big tech wields so much control over political communication. They dominate the dissemination of information and the coordination of political mobilization. But the most concerning fact is that they have become politically unaccountable, yet accountability is the very essence of a democratic society. Unhindered by democratic oversight, technology companies have control over society's access to information and media, and the only driver that motivates them is profits, disregarding any democratic values they should help preserve. On the contrary, they are the very platform where fake news are spread on a large scale, globally, in a matter of seconds, and reaching billions of people. The ways in which online platforms are currently engineered exacerbate polarization, radicalize users, and reward engagement with disinformation and extreme content. There have even been documented instances of manipulations of electoral processes. We live in a time when the means through which people access news is social media, when
Point of information. Please, Leonard.
You've talked about how the big tech is a threat to democracy, but the question that is posed is whether it is the threat to democracy, implying it is the most urgent threat that is currently facing democracy, And so far, I have not heard any point that would support that claim. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was just getting to that point. So, on the contrary, big tech, as you said, are the very platform where fake news are spread on a large scale. The ways in which these online platforms are currently engineered exacerbate polarization. And there have been documented instances of manipulation of electoral processes, the very basis of democracy. If that's not making big tech the real threat to democracies right now, I don't know what is. We live in a time when the means through which people access news is social media, through big tech, when fake news are the main driver of voter behavior, and when unreliable information shapes voter choices, and subsequently election outcomes. How can we possibly say that fake news are not a threat to democracy when the very basis of it, which are elections, are decided by them? How can we be free if the very democratic values of our society stands for liberty, equality, and justice are under siege by the profit-driven interests of big tech companies and their elites? If that's not one of the realest threats to democracy that there ever is, of the realest one, then I don't know what is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kova. Who do we have leading the opposing of the motion? Susana Romero, please come. Susana is studying here at the IEP. She's one of yours, and she's doing the MA in Governance, Leadership and Democracy. You have the floor, Susana. And you've been awfully polite, the audience. I'm looking round to see who is going to be brave and make interventions. You're very welcome. Susana.
Thank you. Welcome to the Museum of Democracy. Maybe you didn't know, but you took a seat in this room and you got a free ticket, my dear colleagues. The thing is that my friends on this side got a free ticket too, but what they decided to do was just to stay in front of a painting and be like this and not seeing the full picture. So I understand that position is the easiest, the simplest, but don't worry, you'll think in a very different way after this. So, as part of the opposing team, I will announce some of the arguments that we'll be explaining in a detailed way. Big tech is no threat right now. It can evidently strengthen democratic institutions. Fake news is something for like a threat to democracies today? No. Fake news is nothing new. Media has always been susceptible to biases, inaccuracies, and government propaganda. In the 16th, 17th century already existed. And during the first century, even after like Gutenberg, print did as much to spread lies and false information as enlighten truth. Well, they're coordinated. Yes.
I think the motion is big tech and fake news. So if you are separating fake news, then obviously it changes the motion. The reason it is posed to be the real threat to democracies today is because I guess we cannot separate fake news from big tech today.
Thank you.
Don't worry, we're not doing it like separate problems, but the thing for a clear analysis right now, like for historical purposes, we need to do it. But in the end, don't worry, like they are extremely like related. We're having like the same line, don't worry. Thank you. So let me keep on going. So this is not new. Even during the French Revolution, everyone that was against the Reign Terror would be like even assassinated. Even in this U.S. Congress in 1798, like passed the Sedition Act in order to punish false statements about the government made with malicious intent. And this was used to only suppress any opinion contrary to the president, which actually was like the essence of the First Amendment of the US constitutions. We're talking here about, is fake news like a real threat? No. What it is the prohibition strategies being implemented, because we're going to attack just the symptoms and not the disease. A punitive strategy to fight false statements may be even worse than the lies themselves, because we're misdirecting efforts sometimes. A system that controls the right of expression in the name of a supposed...
Okay. You have to take it.
Yes, I'm waiting.
Please, briefly.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the statement. But do you think that the easiness of the spread of information is actually happening? It's actually helping the spread of the fake news that is actually common knowledge is not new, but it's make it easier. Do you think it's actually the real threat and new threat to democracy today?
The thing is, we need to...
That isn't a point of information, that's a question. So
Yes.
it's up to you to answer it, or you could ignore it.
It will be answered with my...
He's clapping.
Okay. Okay. So democracy is government by the people, it was said, but liberal democracy also includes freedoms and rights, such as freedom of speech. An autocratic government cannot be disguised as digital protection with the punitive strategies that are being implemented. And we have some other examples all over the world. We need to unroll the map, my dear colleagues. We cannot just focus in two examples. You need to check even like in some other continents, like Latin America, where they have collaborative and not punitive strategies to combat fake news.
15 seconds.
Okay. We are also talking about like the long-term solution. It's media literacy training. And if big tech and fake news are not the big threat today, which is the one that it's actually, it's structural inequalities that perpetuate the limited access to basic needs. Nowadays, active citizenship in a modern constitutional democracy cannot become the privilege of a select few.
Thank you very much, Susanna. We now go to the seconder for the motion, and we invite Caterina Abrodopino, who's doing also the MA in Governance, Leadership and Democracy here at the IEP. You have the floor, Caterina.
Thank you. Honorable Chairman, distinguished guests. Information technology was heralded as tool of a democratic process. According to a new study by a computer scientist at Columbia University and the French National Institute, 59% of links shared on social media have never actually been clicked, which means that most people appear to retweet news without ever reading it. The Eurobarometer of 2018 has shown that 83% of respondents say that fake news represent a danger to democracy. They are particularly concerned about intentionally disinformation aimed at influencing elections and immigration policies. Almost 3/4 of 18 to 29-year-old Europeans now consume news on the social media every day. Increasingly, they are confronted with disinformation.
Intervention. I take this one. It's just an intervention?
Okay.
Would you like to take an intervention? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to talk about the relationship of big tech and democratization. I think it's undebated that big tech has opened up the floor of journalism and media and the flow of information in general. And by reversing that trend, by over-regulating big tech, we actually undermine this democratization process which we had in the media markets by the rise of big tech in the last 10 years. So what do you think about that?
Thank you.
Okay, I'll answer during my speech, if I can. We can actually say that one preeminent example was around the EU referendum, when online channels were found to have been used to serve up target fake information designed specially to undermine institutions and incite anti-EU sentiment. This was very similar to the allegation against Facebook with respect to its role in helping to spread fake news during Donald Trump's successful US presidential campaign. According to this partisan view, individual citizens are motivated by their political identities rather than the truth, and will therefore believe in false information if it supports these identities. This is highly damaging for liberal democracy. It is shown to implicate public deliberation in the spreading of fake news to point to undemocratic solutions based on elite gatekeeping and censorship, and to reinforce an anti-democratic discourse about the incompetence of average citizens. When voters don't believe the electoral process is working and lose trust in democracy, they may be more likely to encourage violent coups, or they might even offer popular support as a democratically elected government turns authoritarian by undermining the system that keep it accountable, such as...
Another intervention.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't have to take it.
Okay. Okay, I take it. Okay.
So what you're saying is that it is the political discourse and not the fake news itself that is damaging the electoral credibility and the trust into democratic institutions.
No, it's not. But
Microphone.
But when I finished, you'll see that I answer all of your questions. But let me just finish, please. When voters don't believe, recent years, doubts have surfaced about the effects of information technology on democracy. The exercise of such overt political influence, a political group or foreign government that wants to show division or hatred in our society now has the tools to find a sympathetic audience and spread their message easily and cheaply. One of the ways they can do this is by targeted advertising. That means that you are probably unaware of what political messages others are being shown. This is dangerous. That is dangerous to our democracies. This sort of material has the potential to further inflame tensions and lead to real-world violence. Our differences can be exploited by those who wish to divide us. We have to be aware that we are facing threats from the inside and the outside. The ways in which dominant platforms filter and spread information online presents a serious political threat not only to newer, more fragile democracies, but also to long-standing Western liberal democracies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katerina. And now we have the seconder who is opposing the motion. It's Leonard Paetz. You've already heard from him a few times already. Very active. He is doing the European Politics and Society MA, which is an Erasmus program, and he does that also at Leiden and Prague and Krakow. Leonard, you have the floor. And by the way, remember you are trying to pick sides, so you can say boo and hiss, and you should clap for the side that you are keenest on. It's nice to clap for everybody, but now we have to forget a little bit of Portuguese politeness and clap for the person you really favor. Over to you, Leonard.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, previous speakers, for your enlightening words. Though so far, I must say, I have not been really hearing many convincing arguments from the side in favor, because the motion as put forward, again, I have put that question before, are big tech and fake news the real threats to democracies today? And while it is, in my opinion, not an argument to be made that there are no threat, there are so many more significant threats to democracies we face today. First of all, first point for me to make is that the electoral influence of fake news has been proven to be minimal. A very small share of, in the 2016 election, a very small share of the vote change can be attributed to fake news, which my colleague will go into at a later stage. Further, the existence of big tech has proven to be also a potential for increased cooperation between democracies and beyond. For example, the EU-US Tech and Trade Cooperation Forum that met in September of this year has shown the possibility for cooperated policy and regulation approaches in order to ensure a fair and equitable.
Point of information?
No, it's an objection. What he's saying.
Oh, so it's an intervention?
Yes, an intervention.
Would you take an intervention?
Yes.
Thank you very much for taking it.
I want to say thank you also for that interesting history lesson that nobody here feel like knew what was about. Let's just focus back on the motion question, all right? You're saying that they play a minimal effect on election results. I think people here follow the news. They've seen what happened in the US election of 2016 with Donald Trump. Also, do we all remember what happened in January 6, 2021? A violent mob storming the US Capitol, the very seat of democracy. What is going on? And that was fueled by President Trump's comment on Facebook and on many platforms that he was banned from. You're also saying that there's a big cooperation that tech is working. You're just doing the same thing that they're doing, fake news, but you're scapegoating. So please focus.
So to come to your first point, as I said, my colleague will go into that later, but it can indeed be attributed. If you look at the famous conspiracy theory of the child porn sex ring in a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C., even among the Trump supporters, only 14% actually believed in that theory. And then to your second point, I did never mention the attack on the US Congress, which of course is abhorrent, and fake news may have played a part in that. I was talking about electoral intervention and how fake news affects electoral processes.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. Do you want a bit more? And then
yes.
Just 1 second.
Anyway, the real thing about fake news is that they themselves do not affect democracy in a way that many here believe. It is that they exacerbate existing social issues. We have social inequalities, we have economic inequalities, we have existing political debates and problems that are exacerbated through big tech and fake news. Moreover, it is not fake news that is the issue.
Would you take an objection? A point of information you must take.
Yes.
Thank you for taking my intervention, but you were saying that it doesn't change the electoral panel of a country. For example, in my country, Brazil, big tech are really influenced by left or right. So your whole concept of are they biased or not, they are biased. They are. So like in the US, they are biased, but also in Brazil, they are biased. So it depends on which side are on power or which side has power on the big tech. So like saying that it doesn't influence on electoral people, like us common people that get people elected, you're completely wrong, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
If I may reiterate my point, I never said that big tech is not biased. I never said that fake news do not affect democracies. What I said is, what I said is that there are worse threats and that they essentially exacerbate existing problems that we have in a society. And my point that I was just getting to is that it's the political discourse that is essentially affecting the belief, the trust into democratic institutions and into democracy itself. If we take, for example, the prevalent fake news call in the US, we have Trump calling actual real news fake news, and that is political actors calling into question a fundamental part of democracies, that the free media. And hence, it is the political discourse, not fake news, that essentially is the problem in democracies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Thank you for navigating through all the interventions. I can see everybody is livening up. That's excellent. Actually, now we have a chance for people from the floor to make comments of their own. They don't have to tie them to a particular speech or anything, any sort of thoughts, contributions. But what I would like you to do when you speak is to tell me whether you're for or against when you start, if that's all right. I'm going to start with you here, please. Do we have a microphone? Two microphones. Are you speaking for or against?
I'm speaking for.
Very good.
So I have two small points to make, but the first being is that Russia was accused of being part of some sort of mismanagement in the American elections of 2019. And 2 years later, they were actually proved to have been working against the American election. And so it wasn't actually fake news, because it was proved. They came out and said it. Records were shown of payments done, etc. That's one separate point. And another separate point is, earlier we were listening to one of the discussions about peace and security in Asia. And Professor Hasselberger mentioned that the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace had written an article saying that it was talking about the global expansion of AI surveillance. And it was, a point made was that China's defense budget had increased to $200 billion. And that rise of an unprecedented regime type was an autocracy that fed into technological expansional use. So it's just proving more of a point.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you want to take up, yeah. Keep it brief.
Yes. Regarding the latter point, I mentioned the EU-US Tech and Trade Forum, and they actually deal with AI. They have one of their main working groups deals with tackling aggressive and damaging, or AI that has a potential to damage democracies. That, coupled with the Brussels effect, which I think most people here are familiar with, should have a significant impact in keeping AI as a force for good instead for bad, as people fear. Thank you.
Yes?
It's a tiny, tiny point, but AI are technically made by big tech, so they all stem from the same issue. That's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Point of information.
We have a
point of information.
Are you speaking for or against?
I'm speaking against. I would like to propose a question to the group that's speaking for. And it's actually interesting because it's related to that point. We've been hearing a lot in these last conferences about China exporting surveillance technology. And in my opinion, that's very scary. And I was wondering how you don't consider that as a bigger threat to democracy, even bigger than big tech and fake news.
Thank you. Can I say that the third speakers can pick up some of these points? That's part of your responsibility. Not now, but when you come to the platform.
So I want to just clarify some things. Thank you for your remarks. They are really, really interesting, and I kind of agree with you as well. We are not discussing about the existence of these issues. We are discussing what influence they really have over the society. No one has said that there is no problem with big tech or there is no problem with fake news. We are just discussing whether this is the real problem. Because I will deliver the speech and I will talk about it more, but what I wanted to reiterate is that we are not arguing that there is no problem with big tech or fake news.
So Joseph, you were in a sense slightly undermining your own supporter. But
I'm not undermining. No one said that it doesn't exist.
Never mind. Okay, now I'm opening up to more contributions from the floor. Sorry? You're going to have a chance. Your number 3 speaker is going to have. You're going to be speaking in a minute. So collect the points. Let's give others a chance. I saw somebody over there, please, and then somebody there, and then somebody here, and then somebody. So we've got four contributions, and then I bring the experts in. Okay? So please. For or against?
I'm for the proposition, but I have a question to both sides. The first one is about who actually gets to decide and flag fake news on a platform. Do you think big tech, who actually control the platform, should be treated as publishers and being the ones to decide what facts are fake news, or do you want a government body to do it? And if you want a government body, don't you think that would even be a bigger threat for a government body to decide what should be accepted speech online? And for the other side, I would like to question, do you really think that for big private corporations deciding what can be said online and controlling political speech and the freedom to get information and the freedom to express your political beliefs being, I think, the backbone of democracy, structural inequalities are horrible, but we know that it's through the free expression of ideas that you can fight them. To have 4 big corporations owned by 4 billionaires to basically control what can be said publicly, do you really think that that's not the biggest threat?
Thank you very much. By the way, I'm going to, I should say at the beginning, give a special prize for the intervention, or the most memorable intervention, okay? So I'm listening carefully, and I'm judging by reactions. Now, there was a gentleman over there. Do you have the mic for him? Are you for or against?
I'm against the notion.
Okay, you have the floor.
Yeah. Thank you. So, there was one figure about the amount of articles that are actually being read by people and that are shared. Now, I do not think that all of these articles are blatant fake news and just straight up propaganda, but a big chunk of those articles are going to be from reputable sources and news media. Now, why do people not read these articles? Because of paywalls, because of the need for monetization, because the media is in a crisis. They are running out of money, they need subscriptions, and so they have to write inflammatory comments, and people are not subscribing to them. Well, a lot of people are because, well, the headlines are inflammatory and you really want to read them, but most people won't subscribe to them. So all these comments moving away from straight up reporting and all these inflammatory headlines, they are adding fuel to the fire of, well, the political conflict, yeah.
Thank you. Now there was, just a second, one behind you, I think. Was there, who else wanted from this side? This one here, and then you.
Who? Him?
Okay, give it, since you're here, give.
All right, so I will begin then. Thank you very much. I'm supporting the team against, and the reason behind that, because I spent 4 years in the Hungarian media market as a journalist, where has been a liberal democracy as we know it currently is under siege. So I just want to say, based on my experiences, that it is not big tech that caused the main problems to democracy, for example, in Hungary, but we could say other examples like Poland. Yes, fake news is a real problem of big tech platforms. Yes, big tech is creating dependencies with journalists. Yes, it creates problems to be addressed, but it's not the real problem. The real problem is rather governments supposedly and using fake news through government propaganda channels, for example. And it is a much more serious problem to be addressed. And if we over-regulate big tech, who in these media markets are the last channel where the flow of information proposing for democracy is still unregulated and free, then we will kill democracy in these countries. So I just want to say that, yes, we have to regulate big tech, but it's not the real problem. Thank you.
Someone in the third row there.
Thank you.
Are you for or against?
I'm for, and I'm a journalist, so I'm especially offended by what people just said on the crowd, Because saying that the people who are responsible to produce information are the responsible for the disinformation is, do you ever went to a clothes shop and asked for a steak? You go to a clothes shop and you ask clothes. So the information is the same thing. People think that just because they can write and they have all that rights to do it, they can write, but they're not professionals from the information. You must know what you're doing. We have regulation for something because we are doing something really important as we are writing news. So I think, yes, it must be regulated. And no, it shouldn't be all censorship. But we're talking about serious issues and influence. And just because it is not a new problem, it doesn't mean it's not a problem.
Thank you very much. I can also appreciate that as a journalist. Okay, now I want to bring in our we're just pausing, we're going to bring in our experts who are up here on the platform. I'm going to start with Nuno Sampaio, who, as you know, is a guest professor here at the IEP. He's a media commentator. He's been an advisor to presidents of Portugal for many years. He's the author of various books, and he is going to speak for the motion. We're using his time.
Sorry. Many thanks, Paul. It's great to be back together to these presential meetings, special for the students. And it's very, very special to be back to this free speech spirit of the European debate. And I hope that the students at our institute can take this as inspiration to start or restart a club of debates during all the year. So I will talk because I want to hear more from you about this issue, because this is about the present, but it's about the future. And I will try to be brief, but it's not easy, because I would say that big tech and fake news are not the real threats to democracy today. But I think it's very dangerous to disregard this issue as a challenge and a real threat. Okay, there are other threats, there are biggest threats, but this is a very important threat. First, because always monopolies and oligopolies are always a danger to democracy. And if you remember the conditions that Robert Law says about the conditions to democracy, alternative information, it's a precondition. It's a precondition to democracy. So when you have platforms that have the monopoly or oligopoly of the sources of information, you must be aware about that. Second, the way today speaking about big techs and fake news, it's speaking about social media. And the way social media works don't bring new problems, but as someone already told, somehow stress some problems within of democracies. And the problems are quite related with populism, of course. The simplification of language. To be with us or against us and them, the echo chambers, all the bias that people just listen and just read what they already know. They just speak and get together with like-minded people. So I think it's very important to be. These are very important challenge to the quality of democracies. And of course, there's that already have been told. So when you add this way of communication with fake news and with the possibility of interference of foreign powers, authoritarian powers in democracies, this is very, very important to be aware that this is an issue we cannot just say, no, that's not the big threat. No, this is a threat, and we must talk about this. Of course, there is here a line, because the line between the regulation and some form of censorship, it's always very difficult, and it's always very, very, very tricky. Perhaps we should apply to social media the aphorism that Thomas Jefferson told about the newspapers, where we are left to decide whether we should have a government without social media newspapers, or social media without a government. We should not hesitate to prefer the latter. And this this is always the problem. Who look at the Guardians? Who look at the Guardians? Because if you have an authoritarian government doing this choice of what is fake news and what is not fake news, of course, this is also a democratic problem.
Thank you very much. Very wise words. I'm so tempted to come in, but of course I can't. Otherwise, there'll be a point of order. I'm now going to invite our other expert here, my good friend Inês Domingos, who is also one of your own. She graduated from here, but also studied, I think, in Leuven and in London University, if I remember. She's a founder and president of the International Affairs Network and think tank. So you're very well set up to comment on this issue.
Thank you very much.
You're speaking against.
Yes, I'm speaking against the motion. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much to IEP for inviting me to be here again this year, to be in a session where we can all be together. That's, of course, much more exciting than when we do it online. So thank you for inviting me to be here. And to discuss this motion, I think we should first thanks to all the students that have participated. I think the arguments on both sides have been really interesting. I am against the motion, though, so I will mostly try to deconstruct what the others have been saying, and sorry for that in advance, but good arguments anyway. But first, I think we need to discuss the motion. The text of the motion is fake news and big tech. And we're presuming that we are putting both of them together. So big tech means fake news. And I would argue in the first point, whether is that really true? Big tech and platforms, I think what we're discussing here is social network platforms. Thank you. That's my side, so thank you anyway. Well, I'm your side rather, it's the other way around. But so the point, I guess, is that, well, those networks and those social networks, they're an instrument for good or evil. They can be used both ways, and they're used both ways. They're used to defend democracy, they're used to defend fake news, they're used to defend autocracy. So they're an instrument, they're a powerful instrument, no one denies that, but they're an instrument for good and evil. So what really matters, I think, for democracy is the users of those platforms and the users of big tech. I don't buy the point that the billionaires, I wish I could be a billionaire, but I'm not. If I were, I'd probably spend my money doing something else than a social platform, but that's the way they made the money anyway. But the point being that, well, I don't think that the billionaires that are, as someone was saying, want to defend news on either side. It's true, they want to make profit. They have their own opinions, of course, but they're firms, they're people, they want to make money, and you know, fair enough. I'm all for that. I'm a defender of the of the markets. So that's what they should do. They should do that. But also, what we need to think about is how. What are really the threats to democracy? Is it that those 4 people that own those networks? Is it the networks themselves? I think they're instruments. So the big threats to democracy is the people who use it. And I would point to 3 points just to make it short, because I'm already probably going over the time. First, I think incompetent governments are to blame sometimes, very often, for the problems with democracy. If you do not deal with problems, and there are problems showing up, and nowadays, people who are left behind by technology, how do we deal with them? How do we deal with the climate crisis? Incompetent governments that do not respond to people, well, they are to blame if people do not believe in democracies. Also corruption. Corruption. That is a really important aspect, and I think, fortunately, it's becoming, the knowledge about corruption, and it's becoming more widespread. People know that government-elected officials sometimes are corrupt. Well, that's very bad for democracy. That's much, much worse than billionaires going to space or billionaires doing whatever they do to make money. If they're not corrupt, corruption is a big problem for democracy. And then you have a point that sometimes you do not wish to talk about, and I understand why, is the economic success of autocracies. That is a problem for democracies, because sometimes democracies are not very successful, economically speaking, and autocracies may be. For China, for a long time, it has been the case. It was very successful. Taking people out of poverty, let's be open about that. It also imprisons people for their beliefs and kills people for their beliefs and has slaves. We don't want that, of course, but that is not, it's not fake news. They were economically very successful. So the answer to these questions, I think, those are the big threats to democracy, and how governments respond to that, that will be the best answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ines. I'm now going to call the 3rd speakers from each side, and then we'll have a bit more public debate. So can you just hold on for a second? You come, Vidi. So the third speaker, and you may want to pick up some of the points that have just been made about whether it's governments to blame, the incompetence of that, and there were a few other questions from the previous debate. How can you tolerate corporations deciding, big corporations deciding news? So Vidi Rana Vidyaya has been doing an MA, or is currently doing an MA in Euroculture at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, and you have the floor. You are proposing the motion.
Honorable Chair, distinguished guests. Philippines is a narco state where your politicians, your mayors, councilmen, captains, policemen, judges are part of the value chain of selling drugs. Without Duterte, we'll be controlled by the drug lords. It's a part of fake news by one of the government official, Pompey Lavina, spread during 2016 Philippines presidential campaign. One post that got 4 million likes, 1.2 million engagement each week. And that is one of the posts, of the million posts that helped elect Duterte, reinstall authoritarian government, justify 7,000 extrajudicial killing and death penalty in the span of 1 year. Thank you. We're not only talking about one part of the world. Moving out to the United States of America in 2020, the stories continues with the fake news of election has been stolen. and it gets 6 times more clicks than factual news. The story that make distrust electoral process is working to encourage violence proven by insurrections in the capital in January 6, 2021. 4 years between US elections, Philippines in US elections 2016 and the US elections 2020. Big tech has not done something effective in stopping the spread of fake news, despite a variety of mitigation efforts.
Do you want to take an intervention?
No. Despite a variety of mitigation efforts, such as collaboration with a third party, labeling potential fake news, they are not addressing the fundamental issues of their dependence on clicks and exposure, and putting hands off on viral posts such as fake news and accommodating them with a comfortable home in Facebook, Twitter, and other social media outlets. I would like to respond now to the...
Information has to be taken. Sorry. But if it is not, I rule you out.
So far, you have mostly been talking about politicians posting their own agendas on the website, which is what we have also already been talking about. It's not fake news. It's the political discourse that is poisoned, that destroys public trust into democracy, into democratic institutions and democracies themselves.
Okay.
Do you think the fake news can only be spread by ordinary people and not politicians during political campaign? It is possible. We now would like to explain to the against group. We're not saying that there are no other threats, such as, yes, there are threats such as corruption, social inequality, economic inequality, and also Chinese surveillance. We also would like to recall back to the motion of this today's meeting. It says, are the big tech and fake news the real threats to democracy? So we're not talking about there are no bigger threat. We're not talking about there are no other threat, but is it actually the real threat of democracies? And we argue that there is an apparent threat by fake news that is supported by big tech that damage democracy that we are having them today. And you know, Mr. Speakers and Mrs. Speakers, underestimating the impact, like what they did, of this threat is a coherent proof that is the real threat to democracy we have today.
Okay.
Now I'd like to comment on the Madam Expert. If social media is just an instrument. It can support, it's not supporting both good or evil. Then why is the Facebook has repeatedly obstruct the investigations on government and fake news on election issues? 2017, Facebook limited some features called Crowd Tangle, which tracks engagement with the post after a researcher used the tool to estimate how many Americans were exposed to content from Russian operatives attempting 2016 election. And 2021, Facebook shuts down access to the internal report on insurrections on January 16th. Ladies and gentlemen, we're really inspired by the theme of this conference, structuring the alliance of democracy. Therefore, we believe that forming an alliance, at least within us in this room, the believers of democracy, to defeat fake news and the parties that facilitate them is necessary to uphold democracy. Muito, muito obrigado.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Now, thank you very much, Vidi. I'm going to call Joseph. Joseph, your colleagues can pass information on to you because you have 4 minutes now. I can't give too many interruptions, otherwise we lose the end point. Okay, so now I'm calling on the third speaker of the opponent's side, Joseph Jamushkashvili, who is also studied at many universities, including Glasgow and Jagiellonian, and what was the other one?
University of Tartu, Jagiellonian, and Glasgow.
Okay, so he's done this very triple course, which he finished, I think, in the summer, and since then he's been working in the media as a journalist. So he wants to bring that to the table as well. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. thank you for your remarks. It's been really interesting debate, and actually to represent this side of the argument, because I also had my doubts in the past about the media and how it influences people's minds. So let me start from the scratch, and let's like follow step by step how everything happens. I will try to explain in detail. So recent years, actually, the fake news and big tech has become a really hype thing, and recent years have seen an increased concern in regards to threats that fake news and online misinformation as well as big tech might pose to democracies. But don't forget one thing, that we live in an environment where information is more accessible than in the past. So, of course, this is nothing new, that the risks also rise. Our group, we don't go against this motion. We think that there is some risk when it comes to disinformation. I mean, it's connection, but it's not direct connection. And this is an ontological argument, that what do we mean in that disinformation as well as big tech is a real threat or not. So let's go, okay, yes? Please.
When we are having such an epistemological debate about the impact of language, you are using the words misinformation and disinformation interchangeably. They are two different concepts. Disinformation is the intentional use and spread of information that is factually incorrect. Misinformation is the unintentional spread of fake news by people that are not aware of the use of the news that they are spreading. Please make clear which one of the two you are intending, because they quite change the scope of your discussion.
Thank you.
Let me clarify. When I started talking, I didn't use these two terms interchangeably. I just mentioned misinformation because I think it could be also considered there, because it carries some fake information, let's say. We could say that misinformation as well as disinformation are false information, so I want to just clarify about that to include them together. But I'm not using them ontologically interchangeably. Let me clarify that. So, to start with, there is no real evidence, actually. You cannot really find any real evidence that fake information has real effect on democracy. And what is also democracy? This is also another topic to discuss. What do we call democracy and what we don't call democracy? In all these democracies around the world, everywhere there is some problem. In one country, the corruption rate is high. In another country, disinformation rate could be also high. So, also to analyze why we talk about democracy and why we connect it to disinformation or big tech, we should go to 2016 when let's say the beacon of democracy was beacon of democracy selected President Trump, which had some non-democratic ideas, and this kind of hype started from there. So why it's important? It's important because this kind of massive country which selected non-democratic leader brought big hype in the world. But as my colleague Susie mentioned, disinformation always was a threat. But what we are looking at is not exactly the main threat to democracy, but it's a tool. So I will bring you like a metaphoric comparison. Imagine a person killing another person with a knife and government using disinformation to change public opinion. These are two tools, knife and disinformation, which can be used for good, for bad. Information could be used for good, for bad. We can call it misinformation, disinformation, fake news, etc., or good information, reliable information.
Sure.
Yes, I'm taking. Thank you.
Please notice that he took the intervention, Vidi.
Okay. Yeah, you said before about you're not problematizing the 2016 elections. But in 2016, there are messages circulating, fake news circulating to Democrat voters, claiming that the date of the election has changed, that avoid people showing up to the ballot. Is it no threat against democratic process?
Sorry, could you cite what research you are using? Like, I would definitely want to hear what kind of source you are using.
It's from the Pew News.
Okay. I would be really glad if you could share it with us.
You just carry on.
Yes. Okay. So to continue, thank you for your remark. Actually, I will go to these details. I would really want to talk about the 2016 elections. So what I want to say that in 2016, actually, the Stanford research showed that people who really believed the fake information about Hillary Clinton were no more than 9%, and only 14% among Trump followers, which is a really low number. Because according to some researches, especially the one done by American Economic Association, fake news are usually believed by the people who have specific political ideas which have affinity with these fake news and the information they carry. So just to also clarify that one factual knowledge, let's say, only 1 minute is among 500 minutes which usually people from the world consume fake news. So it's only 1 minute out of 500 minutes from media consumption around the world. The time is up, sorry?
15 seconds.
Okay. So what I wanted to say, some governments use judiciary system to also draw one comparison to degrade, let's say, the country to use these state institutions in their favor. The same goes with information. We cannot blame judiciary system that this is the main fault of judiciary system that we live in authoritarian countries. The same goes with information. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad. Judiciary system can be abused by a lot of countries. And lastly, I want to also add that there is no 100% democracy around the world. Each of them have problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Soso. Now, we have a few minutes for a few more contributions from the floor from people who haven't spoken. So, people who haven't spoken before, please. I see this lady here and this gentleman here. Behind. I take 3. 4 or against? You spoke already?
Yes,
No.
yes, yes.
Okay.
Oh, no, no. No, I haven't spoke already, sorry. Sorry. I'm for the motion. The motion. Yes, we talked a lot about social media, AI, etc., etc. But what I'm really worried about is the impact that fake news, more specifically fake news than big tech, have on young generations and young minds that have a lot more access to internet and social media and therefore fake news than we 90s kids have had in our childhood or adolescence or whatever, because nowadays internet is a lot more available to a lot more people. So yeah,
Thank
what's
you.
that influence?
Thank you. Remember the young, okay?
Yes, let me just add something real quick. Because this generation and the younger generations are the future of democracy 20 or 30 years from today. So that's my worry.
Intervention, please.
We haven't time.
Intervention, please.
We haven't time.
So
we don't have time. Can you please tell your closing speaker any points you want to make? Lady here. We're coming towards the debate, the end of the debate, so we have to be
Thank
tight.
you. Forgive me for interrupting you. I am against, perhaps. My question is, or more of a point, how can something that it's utilized as an instrument, as Professor Inês Ming or Doctor, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, Inês, expert, how can something like that be, that it's utilized as an instrument, be the real threat all by itself when it's utilized to spread beliefs, and the people who spread beliefs maybe perhaps are the big problem. But like I said, I am against, just so you could accept my speaking. Perhaps my problem is with the question itself. How can something that is an instrument be the real threat? And another thing is, how can someone take sides when both sides have agreed that big tech is a real and important, but not the only one threat? I'm Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the nature of motions, that you can always investigate. But thank you very much. We have one there, and then one more. I think there was behind here, front row. Wait a second. Just speak.
Thank you very much. I'm neither for nor against the motion. I'm more here like to stab everyone in the back. So I'd like to begin by saying that when we talk about big tech, we mostly think about Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We're not mainly thinking about things like Apple or Samsung. So we are thinking about information sources. Well, let me remind you that these information sources, this tech, could reach the greatness of being big due to the innovation, progress, and liberalization made possible by democracy. Also, let me remind you that fake news, as my colleague here characterized by misinformation and disinformation, is, in a more vulgar vocabulary, and pardon my language, being mistaken and saying bullshit online is freedom of expression, whether you like it or not. So, thank you. So if these big tech and fake news are products of democracy, my question is then, is democracy a threat to itself? Thank you.
I can see why you couldn't decide which side you were on. Okay, now we have two more. We can take two more contributions, but please, when we need to have the two final speeches and the vote, and then we have the photograph. So you have to be well disciplined in getting through that and then moving outside swiftly, okay? So I need your cooperation. We have one gentleman here. Are you for or against?
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm against, but
okay. You have 1 minute.
One
Go.
minute. Okay, I'll be brief. So first of all, I would just like to say, I mean, we will never get to the answer and to my question, my doubts, because this debate is obviously too polarized, and of course, the way you attack the speaker, I'm sorry, but we don't. That's bad. We don't do that. Secondly, I want to ask, because no one explained why companies, big tech companies, are a threat. You said consequences, you said bad examples of they are used, but you never said why they are a threat. That's the first point. And the second point, someone said about marketing, I think so, how it can manipulate people. I mean, I like to think this example. If you are walking on the street and you see like a guitar, like advertising, and you don't agree, you don't think, oh, this is not for me. It's not for you. You think it's manipulating, it's forcing you. Just walk away. It's not for you. You don't buy it. You don't just walk away. Go to have saxophone lessons. And also second, on social media, I'd like to say that regularizing social media and what people say or write, it's only if people start to offending themselves, because it may be a shock to you, but even the extremes, both poles, have the same dignity. I can say that Nazi was a good thing, and then I can say that I fight for liberty. We have the same dignity. So it's not regulated.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have one right at the back, okay? And I'm sorry, if he's very brief, we can take one more. I guess the thing about fake news is you don't know whether it's fake news. So therefore, you can't necessarily walk away from it. But that's please. Just 1 minute.
Thank you.
Are you for?
I will be speaking for the motion. I would like to start by saying that I do understand the point being made that social media and big tech are mostly a tool. But then, of course, we would all agree that one of the most distinguished traits of liberal and civilized democracies is a certain stress and concern with means, by which we could also say tools. Also, big tech, and especially social media platforms and interactions, compromise one of the standmark principles of liberal democracies, which is a reasonable, enlightened, and sensible debate. And they compromise this by the way they are structured in themselves. The algorithm is programmed in order to show you the things you most agree and interact with. So in the end, it's not a global public square, it is a global public fair. All this to say, of course, And just to finish, I would like to agree with the side against that political discourse may in fact be poison. It may in fact be wrong and wrongly expressed and wrongly justified. I do agree with that. But of course, we cannot try to pretend that social media is merely a tool that expresses or reflects the public's preferences. It is, in a way, a sort of taxis disguised as cosmos, as disorder presented through an ordered construction. Thank you.
Have you got the mic? Take the mic. Okay, less than a minute, please.
Intervention. Can I answer the question?
You will speak in a minute, so you have time.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. My question is, first of all, I'm in favor. And I have to say that the big problem today, it's while using masks, is COVID. COVID is the problem. But what supports COVID and the people that doesn't take vaccines, the negativists, that it's very important to take the vaccines because we have to keep the life go on. And the fake news in big tech, to people that doesn't know the true information, by two topics. First topic is the people more old that doesn't have the means to get the information from the true source. And the second topic is people that doesn't have the knowledge to understand the information that is very important. So the democracies today, it's have a problem with the instrument that democracy creates. That is the expression, liberty of expression. And we have to lead with that. And to conclude, I'm going to say that I agree. And we have to get a solution to all people get the true information to keep COVID behind. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we must move towards the end of our lovely debate. I'm sorry there were more people who'd like to speak, but it's been a very lively and stimulating debate. I now call on the closing speech for those proposing the motion from Jaseni Mandal, who I think is doing a PhD in healthcare at Oxford, but she also studied history and politics in an earlier degree. And there are lots of questions that you might want to pick up on, points raised like the role of big companies, the influence on the young, and so on in making your case. You have the floor, and you can have one intervention. So think about it, okay? But remember, you're also speaking closing.
Thank you, respected Chair. Good afternoon. The Estoril Political Forum 2021 gave us the opportunity to learn and engage with some of the...
Is it on? You switch it off.
Oh, sorry. Good afternoon, respected Chair and distinguished guests. The Estoril Political Forum 2021 gave us the opportunity to learn and engage with some of the most renowned specialists in the field. Debate is already on its way to getting answers to existing questions and give rise to new ones, and I'm going to attempt to do the same. Headline from Financial Times 2017, European Commission fires warning at Facebook over fake news. Headline from Reuters 2020, Facebook, Google, Twitter urged by EU to do more against fake news. 3 years apart, the pitch is the same. Well, Beatrice Hall had once said, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. But I'm a little bit confused here about what my opponent team is trying to say, to be honest. One member said that they do not have a problem with the motion that, it is the fake news and big tech is the real threat, while quoting the other member, they said that there are so many more significant threats than fake news and big threat. I would like to say that we are not saying that fake news and big tech are the only threats. We are saying that it is the real threat. Big tech is not some intangible facade or some tech mumbo-jumbo that goes on behind doors. It is run by people who realize the influence they have on their users and how to leverage that influence for their own personal gain. If this was, thank you. if this was applied to a country, and I was to tell you that there's a country that lets hate-mongering pass as free speech and looks the other eye, one would...
You want to take it?
Yes.
One intervention.
Let me clarify one thing, please. Don't blame us what we didn't say, because we said that they are a problem, but they are not the real problem. They exist, but it doesn't mean that they are a real problem. They are just mechanisms of manipulation, as judiciary system can become, as I already mentioned in my speech, etc., etc., as knife can become in a killer's hand, a tool to do some wrong. And this is what fake news and big tech is.
Thank you. Thank you for your intervention. I would like to pride myself on the fact that I have a better memory than a goldfish. You did say from the audience that you have no problem with the motion that big tech and fake news is the real threat. We are saying that there are better. I take that back if I was wrong. But anyway, moving on. As I was saying, that if this was applied to a country, and I was to tell you that there's a country that lets hate-mongering pass as free speech and looks the other eye, one would immediately start to question the motives of those who run the state and whether they have the best interest of all the constituents of the state. Proposer from the opponent team said that we should not chew the map and we should look at the world. I agree. But my problem is they said that it is in relation to fake news. And that, you know, they are against the motion. So are you denying that riots did not happen in India on the basis of fake news? I would also like to address a motion from the member who spoke against the motion about paywall. So, and which is why we need to sensationalize the headlines. So are you saying that media houses do not have any accountability and morality should take a backstage just because they have to put in paywalls in their articles? Accountability is one of the pillars of transparency, and when big tech turns its gaze from occurrences, that can cause rampage outside. It's mainly playing in the framework of anything goes. Its defense or lack of it is that people who are affected by a riot because of fake news will die in a physical world, only their obituaries will make way to their end. The premise of the argument is that we are saying big tech should self-govern, thus form their own idea of what's good or wrong. There are important questions that need to be asked and perhaps can be found answers to through this debate. That big tech gives a number to the effort they say are putting in curbing malicious news. Is it a dedicated team, or is it being put to independent subcontractors? Are those who are doing the nitpicking properly trained? There has been arguments that say instead of just fake news being the biggest threat to democracy, it is also important to think about our reactions to the existence of fake news. Well, the idea that we are blowing things out of proportions comes from the privilege sitting in hallowed grounds and having philosophical debate on what should be the grand scheme of things. When there's a fire, it makes sense to put it out first before it burns the kid playing beside it, then ponder if the kid has had the mental growth yet to run from the fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayasheni. And now we have the closing speech for those opposing it from Ziarat Karamova, who is doing an MA in International Relations at the Jagiellonian in Krakow. You have the floor, and there will be one intervention. You put it off.
Is it working? Yeah. Thank you very much. So unfortunately, I wasn't given a chance to answer some questions. That's why I just want shortly to answer some of the questions about the big techs. I just want to highlight that big techs are those who made it possible to mobilize young people and promote democracies through social media. I'm saying it not like based on some research, but based on my experience, because I'm part of a project which is called Young European Ambassador, and this is through the Eastern European Partnership. And we, as Young European Ambassadors, we're using social media to promote a democracy. This is just the answer. Thank you. The second of all, I want to answer, just to clarify one thing, maybe enlighten you about the fake news, the term which used by Trump. Actually, the Trump has used the term time and time again to discredit any journalistic organization that he feels has made him look bad. So in many cases, however, simply reporting the truth of what Trump said is enough to evoke his anger. And based on the Washington Post cited, the study which reported that 42% of the Republicans consider accurate news stories that cast a politician or political groups in negative light is always fake news. So, and also, like, then most notably, there's no credible evidence exists that exposure to fake news changed the outcome of these elections. And one more thing, there is no one who mentioned about the fight against fake news, which is greater threat to democracy. Nobody mentioned it. So actually, what we should say, the linguistic meaning of the word is government, like the linguistic meaning of the democracy is a government by people, right? So when the countries taking some regulations such as to remove content from social media because it's fake news as they consider it, which is cannot be kind of contradictional, it's also itself a threat to the democracy.
You have an intervention.
Oh, I haven't noticed. Yeah, sure.
So I just wanted to point out one thing.
Yeah.
That, we are not, the notion is not to harp on admitting that there is a gaping hole. We are past that. We are asking for transparency, well-defined guidelines. So, yeah, I mean, what do you have?
Thank you. I will just skip it. Thank you. Yeah, because I'm mentioning here something that you haven't mentioned, which is criminalization of the fake news runs afoul of the freedom of expression, free expression. Yeah. And I just want to to prove it that it's really a violation of freedom of speech and the self-expression. For example, in Inter-American Court of Human Rights stated, a system that controls the right of expression in the name of supposed guarantee of the correctness and truthfulness of the information that society receives can be the source of great abuse and ultimately violates the right to information that this same society has. So basically,
30 seconds.
That's it?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, thank you. And the last point, which is the big tech is not responsible for the political polarization of a nation. They contend, and any crackdown of the fake news invites censorship. The outcry over fake news is misdirected and should instead be focused on inaccuracies and bias in mainstream media. And what matters is not it's not the fact of existence of fake news, but how they treat it and by their readers and how they are used by their readers. What matters is what people believe, and very few people actually believe that fake news, in the fake news. So rather, they indulge in believing that usually people believe in which it's affinity with their political beliefs. Basically, when they see some news and it's make their belief just more stronger. It doesn't change anything. It's just make them a bit stronger in their beliefs and nothing more. So, yeah.
10 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Actually, one couple of last questions. Actually, fake news doesn't work in the way we naively suppose. Exposure to it does not memorize people into believing things that aren't true. We are not being tricked into making an epistemic mistake by Cartesian demons who control our information flows. Rather, we're actively make believe stories to read, share, and discuss people we enjoy doing so and see no good reasons not to.
Yep. Time
Thank
out.
you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the main speakers. I don't know if you noticed that we've actually traveled the world in our speakers. They've come from Mexico, from Holland, from Georgia, from Indonesia, from Azerbaijan, if I'm right, from Portugal, wonderful, and even from India, my country. So. Now, don't go. You're not allowed to go. Now we need to vote, okay? And then we need to move outside. So I'm going to put the motion. All those in favor of the motion, are big tech and Fake News, the Real Threat to Democracies Today. Please vote on what you heard. Please vote on who convinced you. Please vote on who you remember as being a great speaker, okay? So all those in favor, please show, and we'll count. Hands high, because it's hard. If you're not sure, you can abstain, remember? You can abstain if you're not sure. This is on what you heard in the debate, not what's in your heart. You're allowed to vote for yourselves. Because presumably you thought that you spoke well. So you can vote. Yeah. Okay? All those against, please count. Okay. Yeah. All those who abstain. Abstain, they're not made up their mind. Convinced by both sides. Abstain? 40, 58, 58, 54, 14, 58, 54, 14. Okay, I can announce the results, but don't go because we want to hear your vote. Actually, let's just have the vote from your memory, okay? What you would have voted at the beginning, please. Remember? Okay, so all those in favor at the beginning, before the debate. I asked you to vote from your heart before you came in. So you vote according to your conscience, yeah? According to from the beginning, not okay? Yeah. But you can vote. Okay? Did we get the numbers? Against? Yeah, yeah, you can go. Yeah. Okay, and abstain. Thank you for your patience. It'll be interesting. Yeah.
So there were 4 more here because I wasn't counting our 4.
So it should be 58.
Yeah, 58,
Okay.
and now it's 30.
34.
Against. 4 is 12.
Yeah.
And abstention.
Can you do this? Okay. So very interesting results, an amazing result. We've never had it before. You've been a wonderful audience. Those in favor of the motion, 58. Those against the motion, 58. Those abstaining, 14. Now what we could do is we could ask Mr. Feo to make the deciding vote. Would you like to? But you don't have to. It's usually the chair, but okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm doing it on the debate. On the debate, I'm going to go for. But it was very close. It was very close. Now, also, before the debate, there were 40 votes for the motion, 48 votes against the motion. So there was a shift towards for from your previous view, okay? But I think the main thing is it's been a wonderful debate. We've had some really good contributions. It's a great exercise, it's great fun, and I thought the audience was very good. Now I have a little prize to give. I thought honorable mention for, is it Doreen? For her point about information and disinformation. But actually, I'm giving the prize to the lady here who asked two very... I thought she asked two very telling questions which were never fully answered. I tried to bring them back to the attention of our speakers. They were tough questions, and they were clearly put. That's important. One of the things you learn is not how much you say or how clever you say it, but if you put it clearly and you can catch the imagination. Thank you all. Now we must go and take our photos.